Black couple vanished on a road trip in 1985 to 12 years later. Farmer found this in his old barn. It happened outside a town no one drives through on purpose. Linden, Tennessee, population just under 900 back then. A patch of highway, 2 gas stations, and a church that doubled as a town hall on Sundays. Blink and you'd miss it. Most people did. But in the summer of 1985, a black couple in their 30s, Andre and Rochelle Gaines, didn't just blink. They stopped. They had been on the road for 3 days, driving a copper-colored Pontiac Bonneville with the windows rolled down and a stack of cassettes on the dash. They left from Atlanta, heading toward Little Rock, maybe farther. Friends weren't sure. Their route was loose, spontaneous. They'd been saving for years, telling everyone they just needed one summer with no clocks. And for a while, it looked like that's what they had. Their last confirmed sighting came from a roadside diner called Martha's Stop Inn just off Highway 412. Rochelle ordered eggs with no yolks. Andre asked for whatever's fresh. The waitress remembered because they tipped well and took a photo with the owner's kid by the old vending machine. That photo would become the last image anyone had of them, because after they paid their bill and got back in the car, they were never seen again, not by family, not by friends, not by anyone. No calls, no bank activity, no reports of a crash, no recovered car, nothing. At first, police said they'd probably just wandered off. Then, weeks later, when calls stopped getting returned and the parents of both Andre and Rochelle filed formal missing persons reports, the tone shifted. The problem was, without a crime scene, without even a tire mark, there wasn't anything to investigate. The case grew cold fast, and in towns like Linden, cold cases don't get revisited, they get buried. 12 years later, almost to the day, that changed. It started with a storm, a real one, not a metaphor, late August 1997. The kind of thunderstorm that soaks bone through steel and pulls tree roots out of the ground. It tore through the region for 2 nights. On the 3rd day, once the worst of it passed, a farmer named Donald Lafferty went out to check the damage to his property just north of Linden's outskirts. His barn, built by his grandfather in the 1940s, had lost half its roof. Tin sheeting peeled back like foil, rafters cracked in the middle. But that wasn't the part that stopped him, it was the smell. He'd been around animals long enough to know the difference between wet hay and something else, something that had no reason to be there. Lafferty opened the barn door and stepped inside. The light cut sharp across the dust. Everything was where he'd left it. A pile of rusted tools, a stack of seed bags, an overturned wheelbarrow, and in the back a wooden panel wall that had been eaten soft with mold, except now one section had buckled. Behind it something glinted. At first he thought it was old paint, but when he got closer, he realized it was plastic. Layered, yellowed, and curled up at the corners. A license plate, and under that, canvas, heavy canvas, and the edge of something that looked like a bumper. He backed out, called the sheriff. That call reopened one of Tennessee's quietest missing persons cases. It took 3 hours for them to clear enough of the collapsed wall to confirm it. A full vehicle had been entombed in the back of Lafferty's barn, hidden behind a false panel that no one had touched in over a decade. The car matched the description given in the original case file, copper-colored Pontiac Bonneville. Georgia plates. Missing since July 1985, the interior was mostly intact, seats mummified by heat and mold. There were still clothes in the back seat, half a melted cassette in the radio. The glove box held a road atlas, a pack of chewing gum, and a napkin scribbled with names no one could connect to anyone involved in the case. And then there was the trunk. They opened it at 4:46 p.m., but not with cameras, not with lights. There was no press, no reporters, just 2 deputies and a sheriff who'd been on the job since '78. And what they found inside wasn't what anyone expected, because it wasn't bodies, it wasn't blood, it wasn't even personal items, it was something else, something that shouldn't have been there. Something that would raise more questions than answers, and change the way the town of Linden spoke about that summer in '85. Deputy Ray Holcomb had seen his share of strange things. He'd pulled bodies out of swollen creeks, found 2 cousins living off raccoons in a trailer with no plumbing, and once arrested a man for trying to marry a scarecrow in full view of the courthouse. But the moment that trunk creaked open, he stepped back, not because of what he saw, but because of what he didn't. No blood, no bones, no sign of struggle, just silence. Inside the trunk was a stack of newspapers, folded precisely, dated from June and July of 1985, all local to Tennessee. None from Georgia. On top of them, a cassette case, blank. No label, no handwriting. Just dust and condensation streaking the plastic like something had been sweating beneath it. And beneath that, a Polaroid face down. Ray picked it up with a pen through the edge, standard protocol, and turned it over. It showed the barn, this barn, same view, same rafters, Same rotten wall, only the photo was dated July 17, 1985, 3 days after Andre and Rochelle were last seen. There was no one in the photo. No vehicle, no sign of life, just an image of the barn's interior, lit by daylight that could only have come from the west-facing gap in the boards, which meant it had been taken late in the day. Around the same time they would have been leaving the diner just 30 miles east. Someone had been here. Someone had taken a picture of the hiding place, before it became one. Sheriff Lyle Fenton, who'd been running Perry County for almost 20 years, stood behind Holcomb and didn't say a word for a full minute. Then he finally broke the silence. "Get that damn wall down," he said. "All of it. I want to see what's behind it, under it, above it. If this car's been here since '85, someone had to seal it in. And I want to know who." Now, but they never found tool marks, no nails, no hammerings, not even dust displaced from the beams. It was as if the barn had been built around the vehicle, which made no sense. It had stood since World War II. Lafferty insisted he'd never seen the car before. That section of the barn hadn't been used in years, not since his father died and they stopped raising hogs. He rarely went past the first row of feed bins, claimed he never noticed anything odd, and considering the heavy paneling and a decade's worth of mildew, there wasn't much reason to doubt him, except when they moved the last piece of rotten timber from under the Bonneville, they found something else, a leather-bound Bible. It was scorched along the edges, water damaged through the spine, but readable, stamped with gold lettering on the inside cover. "To Rochelle, may his word travel with you," and dated June 1985, signed Mama. They had the names, but no bodies, no suspects, no reason why. The media picked up the story for a day or two. Local TV anchors came down from Nashville, did soft focus interviews in front of the barn, asked Don Lafferty what it felt like to discover a mystery sealed for 12 years. He said, "It felt like I wasn't supposed to." Then he didn't say much else. The car was towed, sealed, sent to a lab in Memphis. They ran every test they had. No fingerprints, no hair, no skin cells. The license plate didn't match any other crimes. The cassette inside the player was blank on both sides, wiped clean magnetically. And the Polaroid, no fingerprints, not even on the back. When they examined the frame of the Bonneville, they found something that made one of the techs quit the force 2 weeks later. In the engine bay, crammed deep in the gap where a battery should have been, they found an envelope, bone dry, unmarked, no stamp, no address. Inside was a single strip of paper, 4 words: "They were never alone." The letter, if you could call it that, was turned over to the FBI the next morning. They didn't make a public statement. They didn't brief the press. Just sent down 2 agents from the Nashville field office who arrived unmarked, didn't wear jackets, and asked to speak to Sheriff Fenton without tape, without company, and without notes. One of them, Agent Clara Withrow, stayed behind after the meeting. She walked the perimeter of the barn twice, measured the distance from the barn to the road, took a Polaroid of the same western wall. Then she did something that caught Ray Holcomb's eye. She stood in the center of the barn, where the Bonneville had rested, and closed her eyes, just stood there, long enough that Ray asked if she needed water. She said, "I just wanted to feel what they felt." He didn't ask what she meant. Andre Gaines had grown up on the east side of Atlanta, only son of a seamstress and a postal worker. Quiet, studious, a little obsessed with maps. His mother once said that when other kids asked for bikes, he asked for atlases. He had a habit of highlighting roads he'd never driven, saying, "One day, we'll see if the lines match the truth." Rochelle was from Columbus, Georgia, a nurse, outspoken, protective of her family. She met Andre at a state job fair in 1977. They were married a year later. No kids, but 2 dogs, 4 nephews, and a running joke that they were saving all their parenting energy for their niece's teen years. They were the kind of couple who kept paper receipts and labeled them, who sent thank you notes within 3 days, even for dinners, who brought extra batteries on every trip. That's what made their disappearance hard to accept, because they weren't reckless. Their families told investigators that Andre and Rochelle had been planning the road trip for over 6 months. They even had a route traced out, Atlanta to Memphis, with planned stops in Birmingham, Jackson, and Little Rock. The detour to Linden made no sense. No relatives there. No known connections, not even a reason to be off the highway. But when Rochelle's sister, Leona Brooks, was interviewed again in 1997, something new came up, something she hadn't told police back then. Because in her words, it felt like it wasn't mine to tell. A postcard. It had arrived 2 weeks after the couple vanished. Postmarked from Camden, Tennessee, 40 minutes north of Linden. On the front, a faded image of an old water mill, and the words, "Wish you were here." On the back, only 2 words in Rochelle's handwriting, "It's changing." No signature. No explanation. The stamp had been applied upside down. Leona had kept the card all these years, tucked inside a photo album. But she never showed it to police. I was scared, she said. I didn't know what it meant, and if you knew Rochelle, you'd understand she was never vague, not ever. But this wasn't her. Something happened out there. They ran the handwriting, it was authentic. But that only raised more questions. If Rochelle had mailed the card 2 weeks after disappearing, where had she been? Why hadn't she called? And who or what was changing? Meanwhile, on the farm, Lafferty had started sleeping at his brother's house. He said the barn made noises at night, groaning like the rafters were shifting in the dark. He said the dogs wouldn't go near it anymore, that they whimpered at the edge of the pasture and ran if you pushed them. He even tried leaving the lights on all night. But in the morning every bulb had blown. He stopped going down there. Sometimes he told Sheriff Fenton in a voice half-whisper, I think it wasn't me who found the car. I think it let itself be found. Fenton told him to get some rest. But later, he had Ray check the property again, top to bottom. That's when they found the second photograph, not in the barn. Not in the car, in the house, taped to the back of an old painting in Lafferty's hallway. It was the same shot, the barn interior. Empty. Same angle. Same date, but this time, there was something else in the far corner of the frame, just beyond the reach of light. A shadow too sharp to be from a beam, too tall to be a crate, and shaped unmistakably like someone standing still, watching. It was enough to make the sheriff request the full case files from 1985. He wanted to go back, reread everything with new eyes, recheck the diner timeline, re-interview the original responding officer who first marked the couple likely voluntary missing. His name was Delton Marks, retired, living 2 counties over. But when Ray Holcomb drove out to speak with him, the neighbor answered instead, said Delton had passed away the week before. Massive stroke, no warning, but that wasn't the part that made Ray stop cold. It was what the neighbor added. The strangest thing, he said, adjusting his cap. Day before it happened, Delton called me. Said he had something he needed to get off his chest, something about a road trip, about a barn. Said he made a mistake and it might be time to fix it. But he never said what. The sheriff didn't like coincidence, especially not in cases that had sat still for over a decade. He had Ray get the coroner's report for Delton Marks. No red flags, natural causes. But the timing felt off. Fenton ordered everything from the original 1985 case boxes sent down from archives. Some of the evidence logs were missing, others looked rewritten. Notably, there was no record of any canvassing in the area around Linden. No mention of the barn. No mention of Don Lafferty's property, even though the barn was less than 6 miles from where Andre and Rochelle were last seen. Ray stared at the photocopied map in frustration. This road, he said, pointing at a winding dirt route labeled County 12, runs right past Lafferty's farm. It should have been checked, Fenton nodded. Unless someone made sure it wasn't. That same week, Rochelle's younger cousin Patrice, who'd been only 13 when the couple disappeared, flew in from Missouri. She hadn't spoken publicly about it in years. But when she arrived at the sheriff's office, she was holding a Ziploc bag. Inside was a cassette tape. It came in the mail, she explained. 3 days ago. No return address. Just this, and a note that said, play it where they were found. Ray and Fenton looked at each other. They took it seriously. The next morning they brought a battery-operated cassette player to the barn. Patrice stood outside. She didn't want to go in. Ray set the player down where the Bonneville had sat. Pressed play. For a few seconds nothing but static, then a voice, female, soft, familiar. Patrice gasped. It was Rochelle. She was humming a low, meandering tune, something like a lullaby, but slower, almost unsure. Then a whisper. He won't let me leave. A long silence. Then he's not what he looks like. More humming. Then the tape clicked off. Ray ejected it with shaking hands. The tape was old but not degraded. No signs of editing. And when analyzed, it matched Rochelle's voice print from a voicemail recording preserved from 1984. The problem? The cassette itself was manufactured in 1994, 9 years after she disappeared. Lafferty, meanwhile, was unraveling. He called the sheriff's office 2 nights later in a panic. It's open, he said. The barn door's open again. They'd locked it, sealed it with police tape. Ray drove out. Sure enough, the door was wide open, no signs of forced entry, but the air inside was colder, heavy, as if something had been holding its breath. At the center of the barn where the Bonneville had been now sat something else. A lantern, old, dusty, not there before, and inside it a folded strip of flannel. It was Rochelle's. Her sister Leona confirmed it. She wore that around her neck every summer, she whispered. Mama made it for her from Daddy's old shirts, but it was clean, fresh, not a speck of mold like someone had just placed it there. The FBI reopened the case fully. Agents began questioning locals who had lived in Linden back in 1985. Most remembered the search vaguely. Few had spoken to the original investigators, but one name kept coming up. Wally Keener used to run a roadside fruit stand near the county line. Retired now, lived alone. Ray tracked him down. He was cooperative, almost too much so. I saw them, Wally said. That couple, the black fella and the pretty lady with the braids. They stopped here, asked for directions to where. Wally shrugged. Didn't say, but they seemed confused. Like the road wasn't matching what they expected. He said something about a detour not being on the map. I told them they were fine, just needed to follow the ridge till they saw the oak split like a wishbone. Ray blinked. The what? The wishbone oak, Wally said. Big tree out near Lafferty's old well. Gnarled up thing. Folks say it was struck by lightning 3 times and never fell. Ray made a note. Did anyone else see them? Wally hesitated. There was another car behind him, he finally said. Black Buick, tinted windows. Didn't stop, just sat down the road, engine running. I remember thinking it was strange, 'cause it stayed there for a while after the couple left. Ray leaned forward. You ever mentioned that before? Wally looked away. No one ever asked. That tree, the wishbone oak, was still standing. They found it 2 days later, twisted, bare, split into 2 jagged trunks, and just a few feet behind it, half buried in weeds, was a cement slab, maybe 3 feet by 3, no markings, no cover, no tools nearby. They called in a ground-penetrating radar team. What they found underneath wasn't a grave. It was a cavity, man-made, a small concrete chamber, empty except for a rusted chair and a burned-out bulb socket, and scratched into the wall, over and over again. The same 4 words. They were never alone. The words scratched into that concrete wall didn't make the news. Sheriff Fenton made sure of that. He told the team on site it was possible vandalism. But he knew better. You could see it in how he held the flashlight. Knuckles white, beam shaking ever so slightly as he traced the lettering. It wasn't random. Every carving was deliberate. Same spacing, same depth, same message. They were never alone. He didn't sleep that night. The FBI set up a temporary base near the county line. They brought in new agents, techs, psych profilers. But the town didn't like it. Linden wasn't the kind of place that welcomed outside scrutiny, especially not from Washington. Rumors started circulating. People said Don Lafferty had brought it on himself, that no one should have disturbed the barn, that some places were meant to stay closed. Church attendance spiked. Local pastors started holding special Sunday night services. No sermons, just quiet prayer and locked doors. One of those pastors was a man named Franklin Ellison. He'd been young in '85, just 26, newly ordained, assigned to a struggling congregation east of town. Said he remembered Andre and Rochelle. They stopped in for water, he told Ray during a taped interview. Just after morning service, she was smiling. He looked tense, like something was bothering him. Franklin paused. I offered them a spot to rest, but he said no, just kept looking back toward the road. Did he say why? Ray asked. No, but she did. Ray leaned in. She said, he thinks we're being followed, but maybe it's just the heat. Franklin didn't think much of it at the time, but that night he claimed something strange happened. I heard music, he said, soft, from the woods behind the church. At first I thought it was a radio, teenagers. Maybe, but it wasn't a song I recognized. No lyrics, just this low rhythmic hum. He paused again. And the next morning I found something under the pulpit. It was a photo, black and white, of Rochelle, alone, standing in the very pews of his church, but I never saw anyone take it, he added. And she wasn't there long enough for a picture. Ray asked if he still had it. Franklin nodded, pulled it from a file he'd kept locked for years. The date on the back was July 16, 1985. The handwriting matched the postcard Rochelle had sent to her sister. But this time the caption was different. It read, "This is not the way." Meanwhile, the FBI had started looking beyond just Andre and Rochelle. They wanted to know if there had been other disappearances along the same stretch of highway. They found one, May 1979. A couple, not local, driving from Oklahoma City to Knoxville. Vanished near Lobelville, about 15 miles north of Linden. Vehicle never recovered. Case closed as presumed runaway. But then came another, September 1992. Solo driver, male, 34, on his way from Memphis to Asheville. Stopped to call a friend near Perry County, never arrived. Car later found abandoned, unlocked, near a creek bed. Inside, a map with a red line drawn straight through Linden. The connections weren't clean. The cases weren't even assigned to the same counties, but the paths, they all passed through here. Patrice, Rochelle's cousin, had started digging through old letters and journals at home. She found one from 1984 that she hadn't read in decades, written by Rochelle shortly after she'd quit her nursing job. I want quiet, it said, not silence. There's a difference, but what chilled Patrice wasn't that line, it was the last sentence scrawled in the corner of the page, like a thought not meant to be shared. Some places don't want to be left. She didn't know what Rochelle meant, but it felt too close to what had happened. And then she remembered something else, a story Rochelle told once at Thanksgiving, about a summer trip they took when they were kids, somewhere rural. A family friend's cabin. She couldn't remember the name of the town, but she remembered the way Rochelle described it. All the windows faced away from the woods, and at night we had to shut the doors fast because the trees would whistle. At the time it was funny, a kid's exaggeration. But now, Patrice dug deeper, asked her mother where that cabin had been. Her mom answered without hesitation. Lyndon, she said. Your uncle rented it for a week in '72. Said it was quiet but gave him the creeps. Never went back. By now Don Lafferty had stopped answering his phone. His brother found him sitting in his truck one morning, engine running, music off, staring at the tree line. I heard her again, Don said. Who? Don didn't blink. The woman. She keeps humming. Every night. Same tune, same as the tape. His brother asked what he meant. She's not asking for help, Don said. She's warning us. They brought him to a clinic that afternoon. He never spoke again. The last thing Sheriff Fenton did before taking a leave of absence was drive out to the barn one final time. Alone, he stayed inside for 15 minutes. When he came out, he looked different. Pale, like he'd seen something but couldn't describe it. All he said was, "There's something under the barn." But they never found anything, at least nothing that stayed in place long enough to be measured, because the next morning, the team returned and found the floorboards warped, bent upward, as if something beneath had risen in the night. But the soil was untouched, no footprints, no tool marks, just air that smelled faintly of burned cedar and wet paper. And a voice, caught only once, on an open mic someone left recording 3 words, soft, barely audible, but clear enough to shake everyone in the room. Not done yet. After Fenton stepped down, the FBI shifted control of the case to Agent Withrow. She didn't speak much, but her questions cut deep. One of the first things she did was request local radio logs from July 1985. Most had long been destroyed. But one man, Alvin Grant, a retired ham radio operator in Lobelville, had obsessively recorded and labeled tapes from his amateur frequencies every night, for decades. When Withrow knocked on his door and mentioned the year, he didn't even ask why, just said, "I've been waiting for someone to come about that." He brought her to a shed behind his house. Metal walls, organized shelves, a lifetime of labeled cassettes in neat rows. Week of July 14th, he asked. Yes, Withrow said. He didn't hesitate. Pulled 3 cassettes from a drawer marked UHF Band 3 night logs. They listened. For 2 nights, nothing but static, local chatter, the usual flare-ups from truckers and hobbyists. Then, on the 3rd tape, July 16th, 2:18 a.m., a voice cut through, faint, male, panicked. "Don't stop, baby, keep driving." Then a crackle, followed by, "They said the barn was empty." Another burst of static. Then one last thing. "I think it sees us." The signal cut off. No call sign, no ID, no follow-up, but the tape was time-stamped, authenticated. There was no denying the date, and the direction of signal drift put the source somewhere within Perry County, possibly near Lafferty's land. That was when Withrow went looking for Margaret Nance. Margaret had been a clerk in the Perry County Recorder's office in the mid-'80s. Now she lived alone, nearly blind, still sharp, kept every file she ever touched. "You want records?" she asked from her recliner. "Don't trust the county." "I got the real ones." Withrow explained the case, showed her the photo of Andre and Rochelle. Margaret didn't blink. "Those two," she said. "They asked about the barn." That stopped Withrow. "You met them?" "Just her," Margaret said. "Came in the week before they vanished." Sweet voice. Asked if the property out on County 12 had ever changed hands. I told her no. Still Lafferty land. She looked real uneasy after that. "Did she say why she was asking?" Margaret paused. "Said she had a dream, that there was something hidden under the floor, that she needed to see it." Withrow frowned. "What did you tell her?" "I told her not to go out there, that some land don't let go easy." Back in Lyndon, the community was splitting. Some residents wanted answers, others wanted silence. Local radio began taking anonymous calls. One man said he remembered seeing Rochelle in a grocery store days after she vanished. She was barefoot, holding a notebook, didn't speak, just stared through the cooler glass for 10 straight minutes before walking out. A woman claimed she once saw lights at the Lafferty farm in '86. Not headlights, but soft glows that pulsed in a rhythm. When she got closer, the lights vanished. But in their place, a radio playing a low hum, same melody as the cassette. No one had spoken of this before, because no one wanted to be the first to say it out loud. Meanwhile, Withrow's team made another discovery. Property records showed a narrow strip of land behind the Lafferty barn, about 300 feet long, had been unofficially surveyed in 1984 by a private contractor. No permit, no deed transfer, just a hand-drawn note in the margin of an old zoning file. Test soil, July 10th. Burn pattern inconsistent, the contractor's name. Delton Marks, the same officer who later ruled the disappearance voluntary, the same man who tried to confess before he died. Withrow ordered ground scans along that strip. They found something, a subterranean space, narrow, reinforced, old. It wasn't a basement. Not part of the original barn, more like a chamber. The team began excavation carefully. Piece by piece, it took 48 hours to reach it. Inside they found a rusted cot, a Bible with torn pages, a mirror bolted to the wall, a name etched into the metal frame, A. Gaines, and on the far wall a sentence written over and over again in blackened pencil. He talks through the walls. The handwriting was matched to Andre. No doubt, it meant at least one of them had been alive long after the day they disappeared. But where he'd gone after that, how he left, if he left, no one could say. There was no trace of his body, no blood, no fingerprints, just scratch marks along the doorframe. As if it had once been closed, and someone had tried to claw their way out. The FBI sealed the chamber, quietly. No public statements, no photographs. When locals asked what was found, they were told it was animal shelter remains. But inside the team, the mood shifted. This wasn't just a missing persons case anymore, it was a pattern. And patterns leave echoes. One of the forensic archivists, a young tech named Drew, started combing through microfilms from 1960s newspapers. Out of curiosity, he found an article from the Tennessean dated October 18, 1963. Headline: Young couple abandons car near Linden, reported missing en route to Atlanta. No photos, just two names, Clifford and Myra Hastings. The report was short, said they were traveling east, took a wrong turn, never arrived. The strange part: their car was later found in an abandoned barn, same county, different owner, same story. When Drew looked up the couple's names in public death records, he found nothing, but he did find a birth certificate issued in 1965 for a boy born in Perry County, no father listed, mother's name, Myra H., place of birth, left blank. And the kicker, the attending nurse on the certificate, R. Gaines. Withrow didn't tell anyone outside the bureau about the birth certificate, not yet. She had it scanned, sealed, and logged under a restricted classification, not because of what it proved, but because of what it suggested, that someone had left that chamber, that someone had survived the barn, and that maybe, just maybe, someone had come back. She flew to Atlanta to speak with Rochelle's mother in person, asked her about the name on the certificate, R. Gaines. At first, the woman shook her head, then she said something strange. That wasn't her, she whispered. She never worked in Tennessee, you're sure? Her hands were trembling. She hated hospitals. She fainted at the sight of blood, even during nursing school. She did it because her father wanted her to have a respectable job. But she never practiced. Not once. Withrow slid the document across the table. The signature was undeniable. Rochelle's hand, her curve on the R, her tight loop on the G. But Rochelle's mother only repeated one sentence: she wouldn't have signed that. Not if she was herself. That phrase lingered, not herself. It echoed again 2 days later when Ray Holcomb got a call from a retired nurse in Jackson. Said she recognized the couple from a newspaper clipping. Said she saw the woman, Rochelle, twice, once in 1985, and once in 1996, 11 years apart. Same eyes, same voice, but different woman. She came into the clinic asking for directions. The nurse explained, both times. Same confused look, same question: is this the way to Atlanta? But the second time, she didn't recognize me, and I said, you've been here before, and she just smiled, like a child being told a secret. Ray asked what she meant by that. She smiled like I'd gotten it wrong, the nurse said. Like I was the one forgetting something. That same week, back in Linden, something else surfaced. Literally, a well collapsed on the western edge of the Lafferty property. Not the old one near the oak. This one was newer, dug in the early 90s for irrigation. The collapse happened during routine pasture work. A sinkhole opened, revealing a narrow tunnel underneath. Not natural, dug intentionally. The tunnel ran east, toward the barn. 30 feet in, they found a pair of items, wrapped in plastic. A brown leather wallet, a photograph warped from moisture. Inside the wallet was an ID. Andre Gaines, expired 1987. Inside the photo, 2 men, neither of them was Andre. But one of them was Delton Marks, the original officer, the second, unknown. Black male, early 30s, glasses, wearing what looked like a nurse's uniform, and in the background, visible through a blurred window, the unmistakable shape of the barn, but older. Before renovation, and beside it, a figure, blurry, white coat, no face. Withrow's team ran facial recognition on the unknown man in the nurse's uniform. No match, no name, no record. But then the lab tech hesitated. There's something strange, he said, about the way his shadow falls. He pulled up the photo again. It took a minute, but once you saw it, it stayed with you. The man's shadow pointed east, but everything else in the photo, the barn's slant, the tree line, the sun glare, Said the light source was behind him. The shadow was wrong. Withrow reviewed every document again, every photo, every timeline. She made a map, not just of the roads, of the disappearances. She pinned every case: 1963, 1979, 1985, 1992, then added the 1996 sighting, the birth certificate, the radio message, the tunnel, the chamber, every event aligned on a shape, a crude circle, with the barn near dead center. She stared at it for hours. Then finally she said aloud what no one else had dared. "This place doesn't trap people." She paused. "It loops them." Ray didn't understand at first, so she explained, "What if it's not about killing them? What if it's about repeating them, taking something from them, copying it and sending it back out?" "You're saying there's more than one Rochelle?" "I'm saying, I don't think Rochelle ever left. Not all of her." 2 nights later, a fire broke out at the Lafferty barn. No lightning, no candles, no animals, just heat. The structure went up in 20 minutes. By the time fire crews arrived, nothing was left but the concrete floor and the frame of the original chamber, and in the ash, one item, a watch, old, melted, still ticking, the initials engraved on the underside, C.H. Clifford Hastings. The man who vanished in 1963, the man who had never been found. But it didn't end there, because 3 weeks after the fire a woman showed up at the courthouse, early 30s, thin, hair braided, said she was there to file a records request. Her name? Rochelle Gaines. No ID, no car, no visible distress. She spoke clearly, calmly, said she'd been traveling. When asked for how long, she smiled. Since the map stopped working, she disappeared again before the sheriff arrived. They checked cameras. No trace. They dusted the counter where she'd leaned. No fingerprints. They checked the pen she used to sign the logbook. Not a single print, not even the pen manufacturer's. And in the logbook, her handwriting matched the postcard, and under purpose of visit she'd written, "Looking for the end." By now nothing felt anchored, dates blurred, memories shifted, witnesses contradicted themselves in subtle ways, nothing dramatic, but just enough to make you question what they thought they saw. The first time, Agent Withrow ordered every single mention of Rochelle's name across Tennessee's state and local government records to be pulled. Just names, no cross-checks yet. A pattern was forming, not in content but in presence. They found 11 entries between 1986 and 1998, none of them tied directly to her case, but every one matched her handwriting. Some were sign-in sheets, some were visitor logs. One was a weather complaint filed at a ranger station during a thunderstorm, a Rochelle G. reporting that the wind sounds wrong out here. And then there was the incident report from 1991. A state trooper responding to an abandoned vehicle on Route 13, same region. The car was empty, keys still inside, radio playing static. When the officer approached, he heard something he described as a soft humming. Not from the radio, but the car itself. He opened the trunk, empty, but on the inside of the lid, etched into the metal. Still not alone. No record of that phrase existed in the case file until Withrow's review. It had been manually crossed out with correction tape by the original reporting officer. His name, Delton Marks, again. They reopened the 1963 file on Clifford and Myra Hastings. There wasn't much, just a few black and white photos, an unsent telegram, and a scrap of a letter. It had been found folded in Myra's overnight bag, recovered weeks after the disappearance. No envelope, it read. "I saw the same road again, but this time it turned left when it used to go right." He didn't notice. I don't think he ever notices. No signature, just a date, July 15th. Same as Rochelle's postcard, same as the barn photograph, same as the tunnel carving. Meanwhile, Don Lafferty's brother, Alan, called the sheriff's office in a panic. He said someone had been in Don's old house, even though it was locked. Even though no one had keys, he said when he walked in, everything was untouched, except one thing, the wall mirror in the hallway. It had fogged from the inside, as if someone had breathed on the glass. And across it, smeared in a fingertip trail, were 5 words, "Stop digging. You'll forget too." Back at the FBI field office, Withrow received a package. No return address, no markings. Inside, a stack of Polaroids, all black. At first she thought they were ruined. Then she held them under the light, tilted just right. Each photo showed the same thing, the barn, but at different stages of decay. Some showed it half-built, some burned. One showed it completely buried, covered in brush, with a date scrawled along the bottom, April 12, 2028. The future. At first she assumed it was a prank. Maybe a sick message from someone local, but then she noticed the handwriting on the back of the envelope. It wasn't familiar, until she checked it against the signature on the 1996 birth certificate. It matched Andre. Withrow flew to D.C. that weekend. She met privately with 2 bureau historians, people who specialized in unsolved federal anomalies. She laid everything out on the table. Maps, photographs, audio recordings, the tunnel, the chamber, the watch, the shadow. They listened in silence. One of them, a tall man with gray eyes and half a mustache, finally leaned forward. "You know what this is, don't you?" he asked. Withrow didn't answer. He continued, "This isn't about one couple. It's about geography. It's about repetition. It's about a point that resets itself. A landlocked recursion." She blinked. He smiled, but not kindly. "Ma'am," he said, "what you have out there in Perry County might not be a place." He let that hang in the air. "It might be a memory that thinks it's real." 2 nights later, a child went missing, 8 years old. Linden local last seen riding his bike near the edge of the woods close to the ridge behind the barn site. No note, no witnesses. His parents said he'd been drawing the same thing over and over that week. A woman with braids, smiling, standing by an open door, always a barn behind her, always something dark in the corner. When they found the bike, it was upright, still balanced, still spinning, as if he'd never gotten off. Ray Holcomb stopped sleeping. He started walking at night. Alone, checking fences, checking tree lines. He began hearing things, not voices, footsteps mirroring his own. One night he stepped outside and saw something across the field, past the broken gate. Someone standing in the dark facing his house. He raised his flashlight, shouted. The figure didn't move. He started walking toward it. But as soon as the beam touched the figure's face, it vanished, not ran, vanished. And in the grass where it had stood he found a single object, a Polaroid of himself sleeping, taken from the foot of his bed, the time stamp, tomorrow's date. And at the very bottom, written in Rochelle's hand, "You can't warn them. They've already seen it." Ray Holcomb turned in his badge 3 days later, left it on Withrow's desk without a note. The photo, the one of him sleeping, time stamped for the following day, had broken something in him. It was still on his kitchen table when the agents arrived to check on him. He hadn't touched it. But his house, spotless. Like he was preparing for someone else to live there. They never found him. Just tire tracks leading out past Route 12, ending at the tree line. No prints, no blood, and in the passenger seat, a road atlas open to Tennessee. Every highway was scratched out except one, the road to Linden. Withrow's team kept shrinking. A junior analyst requested reassignment. Said the case was messing with his recall. He couldn't remember where he parked, what he'd eaten, who he'd just spoken to. Started writing timestamps on his own arm. By the end of the week he'd gone silent. Another agent, a field linguist, began compiling phrases recovered across all documents, tunnels, photos, and tape recordings. She noticed certain repetitions, same words, same rhythm, like a code, but not quite. Like memory bleeding into itself. Here were the phrases that appeared in at least 3 distinct decades. "He won't let me leave. It's not done with us. We weren't supposed to look. This road bends differently at night. Still not alone. Some parts remember too well." Then came the handwriting incident. A courier from Jackson arrived with a stack of archived land use documents for the 1970s. Nothing unusual until someone noticed the cover page. It wasn't typed, it was handwritten, ink just slightly newer than the rest of the paper. And the writing was Rochelle's, same pen loop, same R, same weight. But the paper was dated 1974, 11 years before she disappeared. When Withrow asked the records office who had filled it out, they insisted it was original, had been sitting in the state archive untouched since the 70s. Logged, sealed, she had it carbon-tested. Result: paper matched its age. So did the ink, but the handwriting, impossible. It was Rochelle. In 1974, before she ever stepped foot in Linden, before she was ever on a map. There was one last person to speak with, a man who had refused to talk for years. He was 89, living in assisted care in Columbia. Name: Harvey Eddings. He was the one who originally built the barn, the first one. Back in 1942, Withrow visited unannounced, sat beside his bed, showed him the photograph, the first known image of the barn, dated July 17, 1985. He stared for a long time. Then he pointed to the far right corner. "That beam's not mine," he said. "What do you mean?" "I built that frame myself, cut every damn plank. That beam, that wasn't part of the original. Someone rebuilt that side." When? He looked at her. "When it burned down, but it didn't burn until 1997. He didn't answer, just looked at her with the soft, empty eyes of someone who'd spent too long staring at something no one else believed in. Then he said, "Sometimes the barn shows up before it's needed." And then came the final audio tape. They didn't even know it was a tape at first. It came inside a camera, an old Minolta, found buried in a collapsed storm drain, about 2 miles from the ridge. Inside was film, damaged but partially recoverable, 15 frames, all the same. A single wooden chair in the center of the barn, shot from different distances, closer, closer, then too close, and in the final frame something new, a woman, seated head turned just slightly, not Rochelle. Not Myra Hastings unknown, but she was looking at the camera, and her mouth was open, not in a smile, in mid-sentence. When the film was analyzed and enhanced, they caught just a fragment of a word. Burned into the emulsion like a memory trapped between frames, it wasn't clear, but the audio team layered it, stretched it, cross-referenced tone, pacing, facial structure. They agreed on one possible interpretation, one single word whispered again. That night, Withrow drove out to where the barn had stood. No team, no backup, just herself. She sat in the grass where the Bonneville had once been, put the recorder down, pressed record, and said, "If you're listening, we didn't forget you, we didn't leave, but we can't follow you either, because we're still trying to learn how to leave the map." The tape cut out at 3:19 a.m. She didn't come back, not officially. But a month later, in a roadside motel near the Arkansas border, a night clerk filed a strange report. Said a woman came in just before closing. Braided hair, brown jacket, paid in cash. No ID. She signed the logbook, then walked out again. The name, C. Hastings. And next to it, in smaller writing, one final message. He's walking the road again. And this time, he remembers the turns. The files were closed 6 months later. Officially, the case remained unresolved. The Gaines family received no further updates. The FBI task force was quietly disbanded. The last memo from Agent Clara Withrow, marked internal only, included just one line. "We found their names everywhere, except where they started." After that, no one heard from her again. The field office in Nashville boxed up her desk. Her laptop was wiped remotely before anyone could extract a final report. Her badge was never found, and the last photo on her bureau wall, a black and white print of the barn, had been torn down the center, right along the roofline, as if something had split through. Don Lafferty's property was sold. Quietly, no real estate listing, no sign, just a transaction logged in the Perry County office. Buyer listed as Private Historical Interest Trust. The new owners fenced the area and posted signs. No trespassing, land survey in progress, do not enter without escort. No one saw trucks arrive, but by autumn the ground had been leveled, and where the barn had once stood, the land now sagged, like something had been lifted out of it, or sank deeper. The people of Linden stopped talking about 1985. They stopped talking about the Gaineses, and the boy who vanished, and the barn that burned down twice. But late at night, when the wind was right, some claimed you could still hear tires on gravel, no headlights, just the soft roll of rubber on old dirt, and somewhere beyond that, faint and slow, humming. In Atlanta, Rochelle's sister Leona keeps a box in her attic. She never opens it. Inside are clippings, tapes, copies of the photo from the diner, one of the Polaroids from the tunnel, and the cassette with the humming. She says she won't play it anymore, not because it scares her, but because the last time she did, the tune stuck in her head. And 3 days later, she woke up on the porch, at 3:12 a.m. barefoot, keys in hand, no memory of walking there, and her car door open. The boy from Columbia, the one born in 1965 with Myra Hastings listed as mother, lives now in Chicago. He works in IT, never married. He doesn't know who his father was. He says his birth certificate was smudged, blurry, some parts unreadable, but sometimes when he walks past construction sites or empty barns or churches with half-boarded doors, he gets this feeling in the base of his skull, like déjà vu that's not his. He dreams often of long drives, wrong turns, and roads that end in the wrong season. He dreams of maps where the ink shifts while he's looking. And once, just once, he woke up with a voice still echoing in his mind. It wasn't his own, it was female, and it said, "We don't remember what we forgot, but it remembers us." The Linden Town Archive burned down in 2002. Electrical fault. No survivors, at least that's what the report said. But when someone went back to rebuild the shelves, years later, they found a single box untouched, water damaged. Sealed tight inside a cassette, a Bible, a license plate, and a photograph. Rochelle and Andre standing by a car, not the Bonneville. A newer one, a model that wouldn't exist until 1999. There's a road on the edge of Perry County that's not on any current map. Locals say it used to go somewhere, but now it just loops. If you follow it long enough, they say, you'll come back to the same turn. But the trees will look slightly different, taller or wrong for the season, or missing shadows. And if you look in your rearview mirror too long, you might see someone walking behind your car, even if you're still moving. They say if that happens, don't stop. Whatever you do, don't stop. In a drawer somewhere, buried beneath old microfilm and unsorted tapes, there's a final note, no name. No signature written in pencil, barely legible, just 4 lines. He doesn't ask anymore. He just watches. He doesn't want you gone. He wants you to return, changed. And so ends the case of the black couple who vanished on a road trip in 1985. But maybe it didn't end, maybe it was never really a case, maybe it was a doorway, or a pattern, or a loop so old it forgot it was spinning. Maybe the question was never who took them, but rather what let them come back, and whether it's still waiting, for the next road trip, for the next turn too far, for the next couple who doesn't realize the map has already changed again.